Greetings friends and welcome to Let's Make a 2D Arcade Fighter Part 13. In this video I'm going to show you how to do X super attacks. X super attacks, or what might also be called hyper super attacks, are basically ones that are different or more powerful than base super attacks depending on the button press and how much energy you have. So essentially, you might have a super attack where you press square, and that would be like a light one, and then triangle might make it a more powerful one, and one with R1 might be even more powerful. And as it increases in power, it also increases in energy cost. So the two things I'm going to show you in this video is how to do different super attacks, or different X super attacks, and I'm going to incorporate an energy cost system. So in other words, you can't do an X super attack unless you have a certain amount of your X or super or energy gauge or your key gauge or whatever you're going to call it. Alrighty friends, let's get stuck in. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our puppet over here. We're going to go into the puppet logic. Then we're going to go to our super moves little microchip over here. So in our super moves microchip, it's pretty simple at the moment. We've just got an AND gate, so when L2 is pressed and square is pressed, it's going to do our fire blast. So essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to copy this little AND gate. We're going to make it so that when L2 is pressed and triangle is pressed, we're also going to do a fire blast. So we're actually just going to copy this little business over here, and we're going to move it just a little bit to the right because there's going to be another step between this AND gate and this timeline. And that step is basically going to be our energy cost system. So for our energy cost system, we want to make it that to do this fire blast, which we're going to call fire blast X, or X fire blast, whatever you prefer, which is kind of like an even more powerful fire blast, it's going to cost 1 energy. So if we remember what a game looks like, we've got our energy logic, which we added into our last game. If we look over here, we have sort of like an energy bar that fills up as we gain more energy or as we gain our X gauge. So what we're going to do is we're going to put down a nice little microchip, and we're going to call this 1 energy cost. You can also call this 1x cost, whatever you really prefer. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open this little microchip. We're going to go into gadgets, logic and processing, and we're going to get ourselves a variable modifier. This variable modifier is going to be, the variable name that we're looking for is our X gauge for player 1. Then we're going to go player 1 X gauge get. Then, once we've got player 1 X gauge, we're going to put down a little calculator. And this calculator is going to be connected to A. Then it's going to be the value of player 1's X gauge. If it is greater than, let's say 9.9, because we know that 10 is the equivalent of like one little bar. So let's say 9.9. You can also mess around with this. If you've got a small or a large X gauge, you just want to make it so that the value is essentially however much 1 bar on your little X gauge is equal to. So in other words now, if player 1's X gauge is larger than 9.9, then, you see it's very simple this. You don't even have to put this in a microchip. I like to do it just to keep it fairly neat. So pressing this is going to activate our microchip, 1 energy cost, and then in the event that the player 1 X gauge is in fact larger than 9.9, in other words we have at least 1 bar of energy, it's going to play this timeline, which is our X fire blast. And another key element is that once it plays, we're going to put down another variable modifier, and in this variable modifier, which we're going to name P1X, it is going to add minus 9.9. So essentially what happens here is it does the move, and in doing the move it reduces your, this is the thing that basically takes it away. So it checks, do you have at least 1? You do have at least 1 energy. Now it plays the timeline, and while doing that it removes the energy. You can actually make it, as soon as this is pressed, it is going to reduce it, cha-ching. Or you can make it set only if it actually successfully casts. In other words, you do a little bit later in case you get interrupted, then it will only then minus it by 1. So make sure that you go add and you go minus 9.9 or minus 10 or minus 1, depending on whatever your value is for one energy cost. Make sure you don't have it at set, because if you set it to a negative value, it'll blah, so make sure you have it on add. Alrighty. Now the next thing we want to do is actually create a sort of a visual difference between the fire blast and the X fire blast. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn off invisibility. We can actually minimize all this business for now. We're going to go show and hide, preview invisibility, and turn that off. Just prepare yourself for all the stuff that pops up. Whoa. So now we've got our original fireball over here. So we're going to copy this guy. And I think for this one, we can make it ever so slightly larger. We can maybe give it a bit more of a, we can give it a different sort of color. Let's go into modes and let's go coat mode. Maybe we make this one sort of like a bit more red, because we've got sort of like a reddy yellow orange. Wow, you see this one's like, whoa, this one's crazy. Whoa. So now we've got like a super red one. It's slightly bigger as well. Make sure we've got a fire blast logic. Make sure that we connect the super damage, because this is relating to blocking. If you haven't seen our block video, then be sure to check that out. Just make sure to connect this here, so that if anything modifies the damage of your super attack, it will work effectively. And it's going to be connected over there. Alrighty. You'll also want to increase the damage of your super blast or your fire blast X, because of course you've got this one, which is cool, but then this one is going to deal even more damage. So we might make this minus 30. It might be a lot, but I mean, you know, you experiment with it and balance it as your game needs. So now it'll be 30. Alrighty. So now, in order to incorporate this with our original move, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our puppet. We're going to go to our super moves, which should still be open. We're going to go X Fire Blast, or whatever you've named it. And with its emitter, we're going to go to Object to Emit and choose our big fireball over here. It should emit it from the same sort of place, but you might need to adjust it or change the size of it as you desire. You might also want to, in the original dude, increase the size of the AoE of its explosion, but once again, that's all up to you. Alrighty. So now let us give this a little bit of a test. I'm just going to turn off show and hide and all that sort of business. Alrighty. So now we'll do a bit of a test run. Let's build up our... So now if I try and use the move, we've got our default one, Shushwang. That's our light one, very cool. If I do my big one, I'm pressing L2 and triangle, but nothing's happening because I don't have enough energy. So now let's go build up a little bit of energy. KO! Okay. I might have enough energy. So now if I press L1 and triangle, not quite yet, okay. Bam. Okay, now I should have enough energy. Hiya! So you see, that was like a much more powerful one. You can see also that my energy gauge went down, or my X gauge went down as I used it. If I try it again, nothing's happening. Let me try and build up some mana, or some KO. I'm calling it something different every time. Now, one more punch, and then I'm going to go, okay, cool. L2 and triangle, suck on this, boosh. So it wrecks. Alrighty. Alrighty friends, that's really all there is to it. That's all you have to do in order to make more powerful attacks. If you want to make something have like an energy cost of 2, for example, it's just as simple as this. All you have is your P1X, you have your calculator, and you could make it something like, instead of 9.9, you'd make it 20, or you'd make it 19.9, or, you know, all the numbers will depend on your own particular game. But yeah, that's all you'd have to do. If you wanted to be like, you have to have all 3, then whatever your max value is, so it's got to be like bigger than 29.9. If, for example, your max value is 30. If your max value was 3, you just have to make it 2.9 or whatever. Don't make it equal to, because of course, if you have more than 1, then it's going to be, it'll be like, is it equal to 1? Actually, no, it checks that it's 1.1, so it's not going to work. So we use the greater than value. So there you are. And of course, don't make it greater than, let's say 10, because then if it is equal to 10, it'll be like, well, it's not actually greater than 10, so I guess it's not going to work. So you make it slightly less than what the actual value is. Alrighty, friends. So now the next thing we want to do is actually optimize this for 2-player, which is something we always do in our videos. If you aren't interested in this, then you can end the video here and go on to maybe the next part, whatever it might be. But for those who want to optimize it for their 2-player, stick around and we shall do that now. Okay friends, so in order to optimize this for 2-player, it's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is, we'll copy this variable modifier, we'll change it to player 2x, and it'll be the same as before, just a get value. Then we're going to go operand 1, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to these guys. This is player 2 settings, this is keyframe, but this is player 1 settings. We're going to make it so that, okay, so by default, when it's player 1 settings, I'll just change the name of this quickly, P1 settings. When it's player 1 settings, which is the sort of default, then this variable modifier, which gets the value, is going to be off. When it's player 2 settings, it's going to be, this guy is off, and this guy is on. And that's all you have to do for the sort of cost system. But remember that when it takes, when it checks, it also has to take away. So at the moment, it's okay, cool. Does player 2 have 1 energy? Cool, he does. Now we do the move, but it's not actually taking away 1 from player 2 yet. So essentially, what we're going to do here is we're going to do like pretty much the same thing. We'll just copy this guy, and make it so that when player 2 settings are on, this guy's going to be off, and this guy's going to be, it should already be working, but this guy's on. And what it does is it will add minus 9.9, 9.9, or whatever you want it to be. And what is it minusing from? Player 2 X gauge. Alrighty. And actually, I did a bit of a run through myself just now, and one of the problems I identified was that the size of the AOE, or the area of effect of the Fire Blast X, and I must actually just call this X Fire Blast Logic so that we know it's different. It's actually a little bit too big. And what happens is player 1 shoots the fireball, but actually gets blasted by it because it's so big. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go health modifier. And in our zone, we can tell it's already super huge. We're just going to make it so that it kind of surrounds, it just surrounds the little fire blast itself. So you're not going to get hit by it if you're, this far away from it. If you're over here, you're only going to get hit by it if you are in fact, hit by it in this sort of a zone. You can do this with impact, but I just do it with trigger zones because that's generally or hitboxes, you know what I mean? Hitboxes are kind of how arcade fighters and that sort of thing work. But you can, of course, do it with impact if that works better for you. Alrighty, so now we've made it a little bit smaller. We have now optimized this 1 energy cost thing for 2 players. But now to see if it works, am I all bark and no bite? We'll have to see. So I'll get rid of this old guy. I love old people, but I just mean this outdated model. Alrighty. So now let us see. I'm just going to lay down some hurt on this dude. So that is X gauge fulls. Alrighty. Now let's see if he can do a super attack, or rather an X super attack. Hiya! So that smacked him. Alrighty. But one of the things is that it looks like what happened here is my bark was in fact worse than my bite, because this system that I've got over here doesn't seem to be working. So that's fine. All we're going to do is we'll just delete this. All this business that, turns off and on and all these sorts of things, we can just stop that. And instead what we're going to do is we'll have to just have 2 different timelines, and what we can do is connect them with nodes, and we'll make it so that it's a no port node, and we'll delete these, and we'll make it so that if the energy cost is, if it's winning, if it's the right one, it's going to go to this node. Then we'll make another node, so now I can go to 2 nodes. This first node will be if it's player 1, it'll shoot this guy. This one will be if it's player 2. And the only difference is that in player 2's timeline, we minus by 9.9 to the variable player 2x. So essentially we have 2 timelines. This one is for player 1, we can name it accordingly. It'll be player 1. This node over here will be player 2. By default, of course, player 2 is going to be off. But when player 2 settings are active, player 1 will be off, and player 2 will be on. Alrighty, so hopefully this system will work. I don't want to just show you guys the absolute perfect way to do it first off, because I want to show you some of the process of trial and error that goes in along with it. That'll make you ultimately better dreamers and logicians. Alrighty. Beat down, beat down. Okay, you now have enough. Take this, you loser. Bam. Sweet. So now we can tell that the system in fact works. Punch, 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 punch. Does it still work for player 1? KO! Wrecked him. Riggedy wrecked. That landing animation is still a little bit funky, but we can mess with that in future videos and neaten it up. But that looks perfect, friends. So essentially what is happening now, it checks that we have at least one energy gauge when we deal damage to these dudes. Once we have dealt damage to these guys, and we have enough X gauge, we're going to be able to use our super attack, or our X super attack, zabam. It's not going to deal damage to us, because we've messed with the whatchamacallit, the trigger zones. And as you can see, it uses like a certain amount of energy as well. So friends, that's all there is to it. We have now done a system that allows us to do not only super attacks, but X super attacks, or in other words, super attacks that are even more powerful. So we have just our Fire Blast, which is with L2 and square. Then we have our X Fire Blast, which is L2 and triangle. And of course, what's cool about this is that it costs 1. So it checks, do we have at least 1 energy? We do. It's player 1. We'll do the player 1 version, and we'll minus 1 energy from player 1's X gauge. And it's the exact same process for player 2. We've just got another timeline over there. Alrighty friends, that's all there is to it. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. If you want to see more of this, please like this video. If you want to see like a bunch more of this, then please subscribe. And yes, friends, thank you for sticking around with me. It's been quite a while since our last video, but I thought we should get back into it and make this 2D fighter. It's so much fun. Whoa! Friends, I think our next video, I'm still deciding, but I'm thinking I'll do the ultimate attack. And that one will probably cost like 3 of your X gauge, 3 of your energy gauge, and I'll show you how to do kind of like cutscenes. We've done like cutscenes in the intro before, but I think I'll show you how to do sort of similar ones, nice drama, like cool attacks, all these sorts of things. Alrighty. Friends, thank you for sticking around, and I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Peace out.